And welcome to the GrannyHandicap live stream. Dennis Cole here. I am ready to play Horizon 4 and talk about disabilities. But it is hard to talk about anything else but that condo collapse in Surfside, Florida. And I've been following this story, and my hearts go out to those families of the 159 missing. But I was outraged yesterday to see the Republican legislators, some of them from Florida, coming in to try to take the spotlight away from 159 possibly dying, possibly already dead people to further their political aims. They were not there to say words of solace to the grieving. They were not there to comfort people. They did not say one word about the ongoing rescue efforts. And here are these families, a captive audience to politicians and their aims. I am outraged. I am absolutely outraged. So, what's going on?
I'm going to have some crackers and Nutella.
Oh, okay. Have some crackers and Nutella. But
I want your wires too.
I can't believe that they would sit there and talk about politics, especially they're wanting to brainwash students to not talk about race. This really burns me up. All of this Republican opposition to critical race theory.
Oh my gosh.
And so they want to rewrite the history books, and they want to leave the mistakes, glaring mistakes in our history books there. For school children, it sounded very much like communist China and their schools.
Yeah, that's
They had kids to come up and crow about patriotism and all this stuff, and they were attacking critical race theory. Now, what is critical race theory? You might not be in the know about that. It is starting a dialogue about race. It is not to widen the divisions between the races. What it is to start a conversation. Any child psychologist or any psychologist will tell you that communication is the root of relationships. If you have honest, open communication with your neighbors, with your spouse, with your ex, with your children, if you've got honest, open communication, it is the road to understanding another individual, which is not as simple as that may sound. So you want to have conversations, not confrontations, but conversations, polite, respectful of the other person, and just talk about things. These Republicans don't even want to talk race. They just want to erase. They don't want to feel guilty about slavery that happened hundreds of years ago. Well, let me tell you, slavery is still going on. There are people who are pressed into being smuggled across the border of the United States from Mexico. These people come from all over the world, and their families are held hostage. And so that is human slavery. That is the face of slavery nowadays. If you don't have dialogue about a problem, you cannot solve it. I think a lot of these Republicans that are, talking about suppressing critical race theory, they don't want to talk about race. They just want to erase the other races. And it's very obvious what they're trying to do. And I think it's just shameful that they were trying to do it in Surfside, Florida, on a sacred site, because they are still trying to dig out the victims there. It just makes me want to cry. That politicians would try to come and grab that spotlight away from rescue efforts, which is why all of us were tuning into the news, not to hear politicians crowing about their wonderful and patriotic new school curriculum that is going to totally ignore race, slavery, and those issues. I'm getting too old for this. I'm 62 years old. I am tired of all of the political mess that we have in our country. It was never perfect. I've been watching politics since the 60s. I hate politics. That is my opinion of politics. I hate it. But it affects everything in our lives. It affects how we live and where we live. As a chronically low-income person, because of my disability, because of my inability to meet these stringent attendance requirements, everything in our country, in the United States, is based on attendance. There is no quarter for people who get sick a lot. During COVID, we found out that people with A and B blood do not have as strong an immune system as people with O or AB. Now, couple that with my mother had everything wrong with her. God rest her soul, she had everything wrong with her. And she was experimented on in the U.S. Armed Forces. She was, at the time, they did not allow women to join the Navy, but you could be a wave. You could take jobs that men used to do to, help free up our servicemen. And that is what she did during World War II. She, when she was in nurses training, she got pleurisy, which scarred her right lung. So she was always prone to get pneumonia every year. In fact, she had pleurisy again when she was in nurses training in 1950 at Grady Hospital, and she had to quit. Now, because the pleurisy takes months to get over. It's an inflammation of the inside, well, the outside lining of the lung. Fluid gathers between the outside and inside linings of the lung, and it's very difficult to get rid of that inflammation. And we didn't have the advances back then in antibiotics as we do now. In the 40s, antibiotics were in their infancy. We still had, in 1950, we had a lot of people dying of polio. You don't even hear of people getting polio nowadays very often, except maybe in third world countries, and we're trying to eradicate it. I hope we do. But, we eradicated smallpox. I have a scar on my right arm from my smallpox inoculation. Our kids don't have to go through that now because smallpox has pretty much been eradicated except in labs. There's fear that it may get out of the lab, but, we have defeated smallpox. But we do not have similar victories in other infectious diseases like measles, mumps, diphtheria, because there is a movement not to vaccinate children. But these folks that aren't wanting to vaccinate their children because of the fine print on the form you sign when you get a vaccination for your child, the risk of having the disease is far worse than anything that can happen to a very small percentage of people from taking the vaccine. That's why we're in such a pickle now with the Delta variant on COVID, because here we are. A lot of us are just, we've vaccinated everybody who's willing, pretty much. We've got a large component of the population, probably 40%, that is not planning to take the vaccine because they're scared of the vaccine. And they may not take vaccines in general. And this is a growing problem because one case of measles on a college campus, and you've got a large unvaccinated population, you've got people dying of measles, which is preventable because of the very, very tiny chance that you could get a complication from the vaccine itself. And so much misinformation is out there on vaccines, on COVID, on everything. We live in an age of mis and disinformation. We need to go back to what you learned in school and in college about good sources. I look for sources that have a .gov or a .edu, and I don't just go to one source. I am a writer. I research. So I want factual information, even in a science fiction novel for young people. I don't want to spread misinformation, and anybody who's in the press or a writer or, people should be concerned about these things. They should check out sources. They shouldn't just take somebody's word for it because they're a celebrity or because they're famous. They should look it up and see if it's a fact. The Associated Press does a lot of fact-checking, and if you go to their website, ap.com, you can look up and see what they fact-check about the news, and you can read for yourself. They will give a bunch of sources, and you can go to those websites and read up and see what you think. But, that's what fact-checking is all about. You don't want to have people to just say, take my word for it, this is so-and-so, this is such and such. If you want to see what the Florida legislators did that I'm so upset about, you can look up. I found it on YouTube, and it was an NBC News broadcast, but I'm sure it was covered by other networks. And it's just sickening that I'm not seeing any major. I did just go on Twitter. I did not check my usual news sources, but the nice thing about Twitter is when somebody says something, a lot of times they back it up with a link, and I can look at that source and read it and tell, is this a good source? Is this a source that I would use? A lot of the people I follow use sources that I use, and I know they are good and trustworthy sources. So, I don't just take one news media's word for it. I look for other sources. I look for government sources. I look for researchers. I don't just blindly read something and take it for truth. My dad trained me that way. He was a college instructor at Southern Tech. He would not tell me how to spell a word. He would say, go to the dictionary and look it up. So I did. I'd grumble about that, but he taught me a very important lesson about going to good sources. Back up what you say. Don't just say something. He'd ask me, what's your source? Well, it'd irritate the heck out of me. I would go and find, if I could, where I got that. And this was before the days of the internet. We had the encyclopedias. So I would go to the encyclopedias. Sometimes I would sit for hours during the summer and just read articles in the encyclopedia, just for fun. They weren't there just to be sitting on the shelf collecting dust. I was a curious child, and I was encouraged in that by my parents, and they kept some good sources. We had a Webster's English Dictionary. We had a lot of scholarly books. Dad had a bunch of books on TV repair and radio repair. I read them all. I didn't need to know that stuff, but it was interesting to me. So I spent a lot of time as a kid reading. And, we read a lot of stuff on the internet, but do we look at the source? We need to be looking at sources. We need to be critically thinking about these things. But I'm getting kind of off the subject of disability. But speaking of which, my neck is bothering me, so I'm gonna pull up my pillow. Oh, that's better. Much better. Yeah. So I need to do a race. So, that isn't what I wanted to do. I need to go to the festival playlist and look at what I need to be doing. I've got a track toy. I need to win 3 road circuit events. So, is this a road? Beaches and Bentleys? All right. Beaches and Bentleys. Let's see if I've got a Bentley that's a track toy. All right. So, yes, I do. All right. So, beaches and Bentleys. This ought to be interesting. I don't want to be your typical senior always ranting and raving about something. I have been praying for the people in Surfside, Florida, because it's a horrible thing to not know if your relative is alive or dead, and that waiting. I remember when I was waiting to hear something about my mother who had pneumonia, and I got bad news, and it was hard. It was so hard. I guess I'll go with the P1. So, I can just imagine how much worse it is. I'm going to wait because I'm probably going to cut this soundtrack from the recording, and I want my words to be heard. So we'll just wait a minute. Okay, blue team, yay, blue. All right, I like the guy with the antlers. Okay. All right. Talking about waiting and wondering. My mother was 59 when she got pneumonia. She had had pneumonia many times. So the news that she was in the hospital with pneumonia and it was serious and she might be dying, yeah, that's something that wasn't totally unexpected, but it was very much a shock when she died. And sudden death like that is very hard to take, very hard. So I can just imagine what those poor people are going through, sitting and waiting and kind of afraid to do anything else but wait and watch, because if their relative is pulled out of the rubble alive and may not have much time, they want to be able to see them and talk to them before they die, before they're gone. So I know that feeling of waiting and wondering and being ready, and it's exhausting. It's an exhausting place to be. It is a very hard place to be. And it's just very, very difficult to try to do any semblance of normal life until you hear something, until you know either your person is out of the woods or, in this case, out of the building. It must be torture for them to think about. You know, my mother was in a hospital having everything done for her. These people, they don't even have that comfort. Thinking about their relative maybe suffocating under a pile of rubble and waiting and maybe bleeding to death. This is not a good place to be. It's horrible. It's horrible. It is unimaginable. And for those of us sitting in our comfortable homes, with a soft mattress under me, with a blanket over me, if I was having to think about my relative and nothing but hard, cold stone to lie on, and maybe not even in a comfortable position, it would torture me. It would absolutely torture me. I have the faintest notion of what that would be like. So, those poor people. I'm so glad that people are bringing them food and talking to them and praying for them, and I will continue to pray for all of them. It's just, something sudden like that. There's nothing that compares to that. You can be expecting things, but it doesn't really, nothing prepares you for a building collapse. We think of that of something that doesn't happen in the United States. It doesn't happen here, and here we are, trying to function. Great Ashby. But I can't get over those Republicans saying, oh, cameras are running, we should be there grabbing the spotlight. Away from these poor people waiting to hear if their relatives are dead. It's beyond my comprehension. Absolutely beyond my comprehension. That any politician would be so rude as to grab the spotlight from dying people and grieving people, grieving relatives, waiting to hear something from officials to give them a little hope. It's horrible. And no one on Twitter was talking about it. I could not believe that no one was talking about it. Nobody was outraged about it. I am very outraged. I'm just horribly outraged. It's not right. These people have no couth. And for those of you who didn't grow up in the South, what is couth? Couth is something that every Southern mom teaches her children about. You gotta have couth. Well, what is couth? It's the 10 Commandments. It's loving your neighbor. It's respect for people. It's loving people. It's respecting things like grieving people. You don't go into a grieving person and talk about your troubles. You focus on the person. If you have couth, you're gonna, you have a neighbor who's going through a hard time, you're going to go see them and you're going to say, I want to help. What can I do? These Republicans weren't saying, what can I do? They weren't saying, we're sorry that your relatives are in this position. They weren't giving any words of comfort. All they were doing was grabbing the spotlight because cameras were running. It's despicable. It's absolutely, they don't have couth. Because somebody with couth and they have the audacity to go down there and talk about politics. They have no couth, none, no couth whatsoever. There is not a word in the English language. It's just, that's just sorry behavior. This is the Southern insult to beat all insults. If you call somebody just sorry, that is worse than the worst bad word you can say. Those Republican senators from the Florida legislators were just sorry. There is no worse insult I can throw at them. That's just absolutely sorry to be there and not stand with those families, their constituents. And all they can talk about is what modifications they're making to people's schools to take away discussions about race and ethnicity and cultures. What's the first thing that a diplomat learns? If you're going to talk to people from other countries, if you're going to Japan, you learn a little bit about Japanese culture. Whoa, that was mean. You don't just go in there and say, America is the greatest country in the world and we're better than anybody else and we're better than you, by the way, Japanese. You know, any diplomat who went in and talked that way, that would be disrespectful. You wouldn't get anything done. So, if you're talking to people that have a different culture than you do, you don't go in and just start talking about politics. Who in their right mind, when their relative is possibly gasping their last breath under tons of concrete and metal, you don't go in there and talk politics. How is that going to comfort these grieving families who are waiting and suffering through this horrible, slow digging process, and the weather's not cooperating? And here's these self-serving legislators wanting to make a name for themselves because they have a nationwide camera. And that's all they're caring about, is that nationwide. If I was going to be talking to those people in Surfside, Florida, I would apologize to them for the cold-heartedness of their legislators, because they're just taking that opportunity to boost their ratings. I care about those people in Florida. I care that they're going through all of this. I know what grief is about. I know very well. I've lost 4 children, 2 parents, and the great aunt that I loved very much. I've lost grandparents. I remember each of those losses. I lost a very close friend who was like a sister to me. I have been to many funerals. know the pain of waiting and wondering if my relative's going to die. I know the pain and months of just trying to cope every day after someone dies. I've never gone through anything like what these poor people have gone through. But I've certainly had experiences in my life where I've faced the sudden death of someone who was too young to die. And I know what that does to a person. Did those Florida legislators think about the deaths of anyone close to them? Did they have any empathy at all for these poor people? That's just cold. I want to put forward the concept that grief is disability. When you are waiting and wondering, it's paralyzing. You can't do anything else. You can't think about anything else. It's a paralysis of the heart. You can't get interested in anything else. All you can think about is that person or those people in your memories, and waiting and wondering and hoping and praying. It is hard to get your mind off of it so you can function. And sometimes you just have to go on, you have to do things. But those people have just lost their place to live. So they're in a strange place. They don't have their stuff. They don't
Hey, we knew this
have
thing would be tough. That's why it's here.
the
Let me know when you want to
memories
circle back.
that could comfort them. Because when you have your stuff around you, you can go look for pictures. When my best friend was dying at home, with friends around her, I was desperate to find something, a picture, something with her handwriting. I found something with her handwriting, and I just held on to that while I was waiting to hear. And I knew she was going to die, so it wasn't any doubt there. But I was just desperate for something to hold on to that was about her. You know? Those poor relatives don't even have that. They may have pictures on their phones. But what about the things that aren't on their phones, that are in their apartment, in their condo, and they don't even know if they're going to even see those things again? Mementos of people's lives. Those people that they are now waiting and wondering if they're going to be alive, if they're going to ever see them again. Were those Florida legislators even thinking about what it would be like to be displaced from your home, never mind waiting and wondering about relatives and friends? Just the thought of having to leave your home and not knowing if it's going to be there tomorrow, that's horrible. It is devastating. And to have both of those things going on at the same time, not only are you homeless, but you are waiting to hear whether your most precious, absolutely most precious person in your life is alive or not. It's horrible. It's just horrible. And it's easier for us here at home just not to even think about it. Just, I don't want to think about that. It's too depressing. It's too much drama. But these are real people that, a legislator is a person of power who is supposed to be remembering the little people. They're supposed to be remembering their constituents. Now a second again. This is probably how today is gonna work out. Well, but I just can't stop thinking about that. How callous of these people to come in and be talking about their political aims and not even a word of solace to those families that they represent in their Congress. It's just, I'm just sitting here in disbelief. I think people all over the country should be talking about this issue. I live in Georgia. The Georgia legislature just passed that law in March that is now being contested by the Department of Justice as well as many lawsuits to rob me of my voting rights. I'm disabled. I can't go to the polls. I can't go and stand in line, even with my walker. I can't do that. But yet they want me to have to show an ID before I can vote. There is no evidence of voter fraud in Georgia. I have not been aware of any proof of any wrongdoing by Brad Raffensperger and the guys that were overseeing our elections. I believe that the count was true, and if the count had been for Trump, I would have supported that. Because I don't control how other people vote. And I believe that the votes were counted fairly. And the Republicans are just sore losers. They just are so desperate to hold on to power, they'll say anything. And I believe that the Democrats are the ones who really care about us disabled people and us minorities, and, we're all in this together. All of us 70% who aren't rich people. And those people in the condo were probably rich. I mean, that's a very expensive area. But I don't have any animosity towards them because of their wealth to be able to afford a place like that. I still know the human suffering of losing your place to live. I still know I've had to move where I wasn't able to take all my stuff because of unfairness. Disasters strike, and they don't care how wealthy you are. They don't care how politically connected you are. Disasters happen to everybody, and we should pull together as a nation you know, and it could be that a lot of the people in that condo complex who died were Republicans. I don't hold that against them because it's a human tragedy. They should get the same solace and community support that anybody, any citizen of this country should have, whether they speak the language or not. A lot of them, English was not their native language, and they had to have interpreters translating for them. That doesn't make their tragedy any less. That doesn't make their suffering any less, and they don't deserve any less response. And, you know, President Biden probably knew that most likely most of them were Republicans. He didn't hesitate to send aid. It's not political. Disaster is not political. It doesn't matter who is suffering. It does not matter if they chose to live on the beach side where hurricanes hit. It does not matter. It's a free country. They can make their choices. They did not deserve this, is my point. They did not deserve this in any way, shape, or form. So, I'm not going to say, well, I'm talking a lot about, you know, how unrighteous Republicans are. I'm not talking about common people Republicans. I'm talking about politicians. And this is a totally different matter. It is a politician's job to represent the people that he or she swears. They swear to uphold the Constitution, and they swear to do what their constituents want. Maybe some of those people in the condo complex wanted this law they were talking about and having school children talk about. But how cold that is when some of these people have lost children. To have school children come in there all happy-faced and smiling and reminders of what those poor people can't see again. It's just callous. There are so many things wrong with what the Republicans were doing down there that I can't even enumerate them all. It's just frustrating to me that nobody stood up and said, wait a minute, this isn't a political rally. People are dying here. Have some respect. Why didn't anybody stand up and stop them? It's just disgusting to me that people could be so crass, so unrefined, so barbaric as to make a power grab at the expense of dying people. It just makes me furious. I am not unpatriotic. I love my country. I love the United States. I like living here. But it grieves me that these people who are supposed to be representing those people waiting to hear if their relatives have died or not, and they're going to talk politics and be all jolly and have smiling children, when these poor people are waiting to hear if their children are dead, if their parents are dead, if their cousins, their friends, it's just so uncouth of them in a southern state to be acting this way. So I'm asking, what's wrong with them? Have they no human compassion? Is all they care about numbers and ratings and getting their message across to the Democrats? When all these people want is news of their loved ones. And while those Republican legislators are up there talking, maybe there are people who have some news. I guess it didn't come, but it just saddens my heart that these cold, callous people would come in and talk politics when people are dying. It's not right. It's just not right. And there's no amount of negotiating or anything else that would make it right. They should have been talking to some of those relatives and friends of the 159. They should have been offering their condolences and listening to the people's stories instead of talking about their latest legislative victory and what this is going to do for them. Some of them have children who may never return to their schools. And it will take so long to implement some of these things that some of the kids may be out of school by the time that, that's a future thing. That's not a right now thing. That's not going to help these families cope with the stress of waiting for their relatives to be dug out of the rubble. I just can't understand it. I cannot. It upsets me terribly. Because I have a caring heart. I care about those people. I care about what they're thinking, what they're trying to, they're just trying to hold on and wait. If I'm watching the news about Surfside, Florida, I want to hear about those people that are buried under the rubble. I want to hear stories from their relatives. I do not want to hear self-centered politicians trying to grab the spotlight as if it were a prize that they can just take. They are taking time away from these families and the time that they could be spending showing pictures of their relatives and talking about them and saying what they were like to the rest of us in the country. This is a time for grief, and those Republicans went down there and stole time from these families. It's despicable. It is totally incomprehensible to me as a Southerner that somebody would have this lack of just basic human decency to go in and talk politics when people are dying. So when I talk about Republicans in derogatory terms, I'm not talking about common people who have been misled by them. I'm talking about people who should know better, the people who are some of whom are trying to represent the people. And these people are not representing these people because they're not even talking to them. They're not even listening to their stories. It just blows my mind. And it's going to be hard for me to talk about anything else today, because I'm just seeing it in my mind. I was listening for them when they first got up there to say something to these families. And instead, they just give a political speech like it's just every other day. I have news for those Republican legislators in Florida. It is not just any other day. It is another day of watching, waiting, hoping, praying, just trying to hold on to sanity for these people who have been through so much already. They lost their homes. Can't these Republican senators and representatives say something to these people to help them feel better? Or at least listen to their stories, because that's what helps a grieving person most. Not any flowery words you can say or to get their minds off of their grief. Oh, let me tell you, that does not work. When you're waiting and wondering, it does not work. There are times to talk politics, and that is not one of them. I would say to those Republican representatives, have some couth. Sit down with people and listen to them. That's all a grieving person wants, is to be listened to as they talk about their loved one. And everything else should be secondary. Any psychologist will tell you this, any therapist will tell you this, anybody who knows anything about grieving people will tell you this, that people need a listening ear. They need someone to listen to them. That is what these grieving people need. They don't need some self-righteous political figure coming in and turning a death watch into a political rally. It is outrageous to me that people would do this. It is absolutely outrageous to me that legislators, people who should know what makes people tick. I mean, if you're in a profession where your livelihood depends on talking and listening to people all day long, then why can't they spare a little bit of that listening ear for these grieving people? It just blows my mind. It's so callous. It's so self-serving. I'm running out of adjectives here because really, I don't have words to describe this. I'm a writer. I should be able to come up with some. But really? You're going to come to a wake and talk about school reforms that you've just passed. That will take a lot of the talk about race and ethnicity out of the picture and tie a teacher's hands so she cannot discuss it. What about bilingual education? You know, they're going to put all this stuff in the schools about, you know, patriots and stuff. But a lot of these people are immigrants. They need to learn English, but they also need to be allowed to speak their native tongue for the betterment of all the kids. Not just the Hispanics in the room, but, you know, everybody can benefit from knowing a little Spanish. You know, we really fall down on the job when it comes to language teaching in this country anyway. We don't teach languages so that they stick. We don't emphasize learning foreign languages, which is a shame. And most people see a foreign language as something useless that you're not going to use, so why learn it? We have a large population of Hispanics in this country. Why aren't we having more Spanish learning going on in schools? I didn't take Spanish because I couldn't trill my R's, and I thought that I would surely fail it if I took it. With what I know now, I should have taken it anyway, because it would have been a lot more useful than the German I took. My German did help me in my genealogy, definitely, and that's why I took it, but because I have German ancestry. But really, you know, Spanish would have been a lot more practical. I've got a neighbor over here who speaks only Spanish. She does not know English. I was trying to talk to her anyway, and I think that she liked it that I was trying to communicate with her. But, you know, it's important that we be able to converse with our neighbors. And just because someone doesn't speak English doesn't make them any less worth than I am. You know? I don't speak Spanish. You know, if anybody should be the one to point a finger at, it's me. You know? Because I didn't learn Spanish. Knowing that I was going to have Hispanic neighbors and, you know, run into people who only speak Spanish, I should have taken Spanish. So I need to try to learn some, just basic stuff, so that I can converse with my neighbor. It's so important to understand people. If you can't communicate with your neighbor, you don't know what your neighbor is about. There are some things that, you know, we all make assumptions about our neighbors depending on what we may see in their yards or what kind of dog they've got or, you know, stupid stuff. But if you really want to know a person, you got to talk to them for a little bit. Find out what they believe and what they don't believe, and compare beliefs and see what common ground you've got. Everybody has common ground with everybody. We are all human beings. We are all people of worth. We are all loved by somebody. You know, or used to be loved by somebody. So we should not make assumptions about whole groups of people because of the way certain members of the group act, or, you know, anything of the sort. I'm a Christian. It says in the Bible, judge not lest ye be judged. If you believe in the Bible, you believe those words. So why is it we are judging people right and left? We are saying, well, you know, this group is so-and-so, and I'm as bad about it as the rest. You know, I say all these things about Republicans and, you know, but really, the point of the things that make me upset is that we are trying to restrict human rights, and we shouldn't be. We should all enjoy the fruits of democracy together. We should be unified. We should not be divided. We should be saying everything is, everything good is important. We should not be throwing so many people in jail and being intolerant. Now, yeah, we should be putting murderers in jail. We should be putting robbers who kill, who injure people in jail. Anybody who is a threat to the society at large, yeah, they should be jailed. But what threat to society at large is, treatable conditions? Now, you've got treatable and you've got untreatable. You've got people who are so involved in crime that maybe they're not rehabilitatable. Serial killers, people who are the worst of the worst. These people should go into jail and they should not come out because they are a threat to society. But an addict? Why don't we put these people in drug treatment? Why don't we help them instead of making them homeless and making them, putting them in jail and throwing away the key, or making it so hard for them to get out of jail and stay out of jail that it's a bar that's too high for them. Why can't we rehabilitate in jail? Why do we throw away human rights? We shouldn't be depriving anyone of their rights unless they are a threat to society at large. Addicts can be cured. They need the right treatment. They need support. And it's a hard road, and they may have repeat offenses because of it. But we shouldn't just say that they're worthless people and we should lock them up and throw away the key. What causes a high amount of addiction in a country? I believe it is hopelessness. If you are constantly getting the message you're worthless, then maybe you're going to turn to drugs to just forget. But drugs don't make you forget. It's the problem. They don't help you to forget your problems. They just add problems in spades. But, we need to be careful how we categorize large groups of people. Addicts, before they got addicted, were perfectly good people. There are things about addiction that I don't understand because I've never been an addict. But I have seen addicts and how miserable their lives can become. So we need to try to have a little empathy for people. Instead of just throwing them in jail because, they keep getting drunk, treat them. It's a medical problem. It's not a moral problem. It's not like criminality. These people are not, especially if you catch addiction early. It makes a world of difference. We need to care about these people, not throw them in jail and lose the key. We need to give people education in jail. And yes, we need to give people a way to make money in jail. None of this paying them pennies an hour. They should get the same wages that people on the outside do. Because how are you going to rehabilitate somebody if they have no chance of making any money, if they're homeless when they get turned out of jail? They have no place to go.
I love you. Love you too.
I'm going to jump. Whee! Well, uh-oh.
The car had other ideas.
It had other ideas, yes. Oh, well. Oh, it's a seasonal. All right, it's a seasonal thing. Let me go back up there. But in so many ways, we have become a very punishing society. Oh, let's get even. Revenge is sweet, or so the poets say. But revenge just hurts people and compounds the crime. Now, somebody kills somebody, yeah, they should have to go to jail. And if it's premeditated murder and, the more cold-blooded forms of murder, yeah, we should be keeping those people away from society. But what if it's a heat-of-the-moment type of thing? And let's complicate it. What if they're mentally ill? Should we be putting the same penalties on a mentally ill person that we do on a person who's got all their faculties? Let's have a little compassion here, and also let's look at motives. The law is full of motives. I listen to Legal Evil a lot. He's really got a good head on his shoulders, and he's helping me to understand the law better. I try to be a law-abiding citizen. I made some mistakes when I was younger. I've been a law-abiding citizen ever since I was younger. So, I'm living proof that people can change. But we've got so many people sitting in jail that don't need to be there. We are paying billions of dollars every year to incarcerate. And we just keep putting people in jail. And the people that really need to be behind bars, we're letting out on bail. And policemen get frustrated because people they've worked very hard to catch and get put in jail or released and never seen again because they have bail. So what do we do about this? We have such a backup of legal cases, it's not even funny. So people are waiting for very long times to have their day in court and for a judge to decide whether they're guilty or not. We should be innocent until proven guilty. But at the same time, we need not to be letting people out that have committed serious crimes because they've got money and they can get out. So, and the disparity in the ways that people with money are treated compared to people who don't have money. A lot of us are disenfranchised because of our lack of wealth. It's not right. So just about everybody agrees there are reforms that are needed, but we argue about how far to go with it, or, all this stuff. The arguing is unnecessary. All over the sake of almighty power. Those of you who are elected officials need to remember who put you in office. The people who voted for you, not the people who contributed to your campaign. Really? We are so greedy. We are so focused on money, 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 that we have forgotten how to run a grassroots campaign with no money. No, now we have to be rich to run for office. This has got to change. We need to be able to run for office no matter if we've got a cent in our pocket. You know, as long as we live in the area that the people we're going to represent live, you know, we don't want to have people from different areas coming in and running for office. So, yeah, there are laws about being a resident of the state that you're running for office in and things like that. But when it comes down to money, people should not have to come up with millions of dollars to run for office. It's ridiculous that, you know, even in small towns, you have to come up with all this money to be able to pay the fees and to be able to get into a race. We should have it so that anybody who cares about the people in the area and wants to represent them should have a chance to run for office and let people vote for them. It shouldn't be just because you're rich and powerful you get in office. That's no. And most of us are not rich and powerful. 70% of us in the United States are living paycheck to paycheck. That means if somebody loses a job, the whole family can be homeless. And there's lots of families who are homeless, living in their cars if they have one. They don't have a car. Living on the street with children, parents with children. This should not ever happen. What is wrong with our country that we ignore the hordes of homeless people that are in every small town, every city, every municipality? I'm just going to do that. But all of it is interconnected. The homeless problem, the incarceration problem, the problem of disabled people and how to help them. 20% of our country is disabled. Disability is a joke. It is so hard to get it that there are dying people who can't get it. It shouldn't be so hard because of misperceptions about how much fraud there is. There will always be crooks who are stupidly willing to work harder to commit a crime than they are to get a job and work. But, you know, to try to accuse anybody poor of being a criminal is just, it's, people don't have couth. You've got to assume that a poor man is honest. Don't assume just because somebody is on my side of the income line that they're dishonest. When I applied for food stamps, I'm in Georgia. You can look at the food stamp application if you go online and are eligible or think you're eligible. It's stupid that you can't get a hold of one of these forms without applying or in the boat of applying. So basically, there's a question on there: are you a fleeing felon? That's insulting to me. I'm a law-abiding citizen. I don't go and commit felonies, but yet There's that question, are you a fleeing felon? It's like they expect all of us to be dishonest. It's crazy. I don't like it. People need to be treated with respect, and I think that's racially motivated. You know, a black person has a lot more chance of being pulled over by a policeman when they're not doing anything wrong, just because of the color of their skin. Policeman passes somebody, sees, oh, they're a person of color, I'm going to watch them. And they watch for them to make some small mistake, and then they pull them over and try to make it into something bigger. And it happens every day, all the time. I don't think that's right. I think we should be a kinder, gentler society. Expect people to be law-abiding. Don't expect the poor to be fleeing felons. Come on. And I bet Republicans wanted that question on that food stamp application. I mean, come on. All of us aren't crooks. Sorry. Whoops. Oh. You know. 70% of us live paycheck to paycheck. Medicaid won't allow me to have a savings account. My parents taught me well. They said always have a savings account for emergencies. And I always did up until I got Medicaid. The Medicaid told me if you have any assets, you will not get any benefits. It's like, what? They want us to be poor. They want us to stay poor. I depend on Medicaid to pay for my prescriptions because I couldn't pay for them. You know, I depend on Medicaid to pay my doctor bills. I couldn't afford them. You have to be rich. And basically, anybody who doesn't qualify for Medicaid doesn't get medical care unless they're rich. It's not right. Everybody should be entitled to the basic right of wellness care to prevent things like cancer from becoming big, expensive things. You know, if we could go to the doctor when we're sick, and if workplaces would allow you to be home when you're sick, we wouldn't have as many pandemics, would we? We should have learned important lessons from COVID. We should have learned that when people are sick, they belong at home where they're not spreading disease. And we refuse to turn from our very unsanitary ways of working. You know, we have better technology for toilets, so we're not spraying E. coli everywhere every time we flush a toilet, whether at work or at home. And at work, it's worse because of the way toilets are built. We haven't had a breakthrough in plumbing in years as far as things that are healthier in the workplace. We need to have better ventilation. We need to have windows that open so that if the air conditioning breaks down, we don't get heat stroke. We need to have, ways of being able to go outside in a green place on our breaks. Most college campuses have places like this, and a lot of workplaces are getting them, but every workplace should have a little green space nearby that employees can just go and take their break. And while I'm on the subject of that, OSHA says that most workers should get a 30-minute lunch break and 15 minutes for every 4 hours worked. Well, I think that should be double for school kids. I think it's ridiculous to give kids 15 minutes for lunch. And look at the obesity we have because of that. And because of a lot of the unhealthy things that they're putting in school lunches now. You know, we are really not doing what we should be doing for our people. And politicians just want to stay in power and get lots of money. There are very few politicians working for us. Of the politicians in my life, I can write my Republican congressmen until I'm blue in the face. They will not write me back. They will not answer me. Marjorie Taylor Greene is my representative in the U.S. House of Representatives. I have written her many times and not gotten anything but her racist newsletter, which I don't enjoy and don't want. So she's not interested in me. She's not interested in listening to my ideas or even acknowledging that I exist because I'm not her party. We need to have stronger laws about elections and who can oversee them. We do not need to bring politics into elections. We need to make sure that we are holding fair elections. It's not right that certain zip codes should get less drop boxes. It is not fair that only one city and a county should have a drop box. We need to make elections more accessible, not less. It's a basic, fundamental human right to be able to vote for your elected officials and not have somebody appointed that's just going to do things to make themselves rich and not take care of the people that they represent. I see so much injustice in the world, and I want to do something about it. I want my black friends to have the same privileges that I do as a white person. As a disabled person, I want the same privileges as a normal person. As a woman, I want the same privileges that men have. I'm a member of many minority groups at once, including in religion. I'm a member of a religion that is very quality-oriented. You know, I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We believe that women and men have an equal voice. And there are certain things that women can't do that men can do. But this is stipulated by the Lord. It is not discriminatory in any way. We are equal in our homes. We are equal in our voice in church. Every member 8 years and above can vote on things in our church. There is no difference between female votes, male votes, child votes of children above the age of 8. So, you know, every member of our church has a voice. And how wonderful it would be if our country would afford the same voice to everyone in a district. How different our laws might be. We are represented by the upper 30% of income. But these people are so far removed from what it's like to wonder if you're going to get a meal the next day, or wonder if you're going to have enough money to pay your basic bills. You know, wealthy people have a very different way of looking at things than I do. And I wish that they would go talk to some homeless people. You know, they're not what you think. You think of homeless people and politicians would want you to believe, oh, these are people who are too sorry to work, that they want handouts from the government. The truth is, half of them are working people. They're going to a job every day. They can't afford a place to live. There are families out on the street. And there are people, because of mental health disabilities, who are dangerous to them, who prey on them. Why do we have so many mentally ill people? It's estimated that maybe half of all homeless are mentally ill. Because Reagan decided, oh, it would be a good thing to close these big mental institutions because people are being abused in them. Well, it's nice that they're not being abused there anymore, but they don't have a place to live. How is that justice? How is that helping them? Congress was supposed to, when they voted to close all the mental institutions, they were supposed to vote money to the communities that they lived in to have support out in the community for them to live at home. What happened? That money didn't come through. That legislation never got passed. Republicans didn't feel that mentally ill people deserve treatment at home. They just said, well, we can save all this money by not treating them. So they're not treated. And now we are building mental health jails, do all of them, where they are not getting mental health care. Why are we doing this? What's the politics behind thinking that human life has no value? We are, right now, through several motions, sanctions are being considered against the United States because we incarcerate more people every year than mainland China does. Now, mainland China has a very communist regime. They are communists. They put people in jail for nothing. And yet we have more incarceration in our free country than communist China. So Republican officials will point the finger at China and say, oh, they're evil, they're communist. Well, I say we're evil. We deprive our citizens of fair trials because of the color of their skin. We deprive people of justice because they're addicted and we don't have universal health care to treat them, which is a medical problem. We spread lies about, oh, all the people in jail are robbers, rapists, and murderers. In other words, people who committed felonies, serious crimes. And yet we have so many people, we have young people put in jail because they are chronically not in school when they're supposed to be. And there are schools with very stringent penalties for that, when they're not even looking at the mental health of these students. Mental health is an issue that has come forward a lot because of the pandemic. It's not good for us to have to be isolated. It's not good for us psychologically to be in a pandemic and have to be not able to gather in large groups and things like that. We are social animals. We need people. We need each other. But what does it do to a person to be put in jail because she's not attending school and, oh, by the way, she's bipolar? What's wrong with this picture? First of all, why wasn't the bipolar treated so that she could have allowances to go to appointments so that she could be absent from school for these psychological appointments? And where was the money to give to her relative to get her treatment? Untreated mental illness is the cause of a lot of incarceration. We don't have facilities. I mean, there are facilities, but they're privately owned, and you have to be rich to be able to afford it. If you're not rich, what are your options? Try to treat them at home. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. People get worn down. Mental illness is invisible because people can look perfectly normal, and so courts might say, well, she's able to go to school. Someone with bipolar definitely is not able to meet the same attendance requirements of a normal child because their thinking is disturbed. It is a psychosis. It is a break with reality. Manic depressive illness is very serious. It is not just anxiety and depression. Yes, kids can deal with that, and they do. They go to school. But anxiety and depression can lead to suicide. We have one of the highest suicide rates in the world. We are not treating mental illness. We are saying, oh, it's all in your head. Well, mental illness may all be in your head, but it can cause physical symptoms. It can cause a lot of problems with relationships, with authority figures. So a lot of people who don't get treated get sucked into these behavior patterns that are very, unhealthy. So don't take my word for it. Look up somebody who's good at psychology. Look up therapists. There are probably a lot of them who have stuff on YouTube all the time about, how I see incarceration. I am not a psychologist. I am not a medical person. I am not a law enforcement person. I'm not an expert by any means. But I do have opinions that I wish would be heard. And I just see so much unfairness. I have researched social issues because I write about them in my books. I write about single parents and how hard it is to be a single parent. I write about people with drug problems and how hard that is for them. I have never had a drug problem, but I read the stories of those who have. So I do my research. Before I put anything in my books, I research it. I do write about sexual abuse. I have been a victim of that. I understand that very well. And how devastating it is to your self-image. You don't even have motivation to lose weight because you feel ugly all the time anyway. You don't want that kind of male attention if you've been sexually abused. And sexual abuse is an epidemic, especially here in the South where I live. If you talk to people and listen to their stories, you realize how bad of a problem this is. Statistically speaking, if you are near a playground and you spot 4 girls, one of them has already been sexually abused. Now that's pretty crummy. If you point to boys in that same group of young people, 1 in 4 of them has been sexually abused. What is wrong with all these unrighteous men who think that they have the right to make children into sex objects? It is not fair. It is not fair for anyone to be subjected to mental abuse. If you're told time and time again, oh, you're bad because you're whatever, because you're black, because you're disobedient, you're too bad to be, dealt with. And you have parents, male and female, that do this, that abuse their children because they were abused. And they don't know about good communication patterns because, well, therapy is for crazy people, right? If you don't know what therapy is all about, then, oh, I don't want to be crazy. But therapy is not for crazy people. Therapy is for anyone who feels like life is overwhelming and they can't cope. Therapy is for anyone who wants to feel better about themselves. And there are ways for parents to get children's cooperations without telling them how horrible they are. There are better ways to do parenting. There are better ways to do parenting than beating a child when they end up in an emergency room. And that's a symptom of a mom that's got too much stress. If you can't control your temper, then maybe your life needs some rearrangement. So it's a complicated issue. You can't just point to the abuser and say, oh, this is a terrible person. They're abusing their children. They need to be locked up or whatever. There are some people like that, but the great majority of people just get under pressure. When you have families that can't afford to pay for a house, and they're at the whim of landlords, and the landlord goes up on the rent, you have to move. And you're constantly finding someplace cheaper to live. Or you have a fire or something, and you end up not having your home. And you're more likely to live in an unsafe place if you're low income. Think about it. Landlords are too cheap to fix up their buildings so they're livable. But if you can't afford anything better, you live with the roaches and you hope you won't get sick, but you do. There are so many things that are putting pressure on young families. And you can't hold it all in. It's going to explode sometime or another. So I say to you that abuse cases, you should never cross that line and hit your child in such a way that it can injure them. But on the other hand, give a thought for the people who are under so much pressure to do everything right and they can't cope. I believe that abuse in all its forms is a product of our high-pressure society. We have too many people that can't afford a decent place to live, that have problems with neighbors, with just trying to live and having to move around so much because you can't afford it, or maybe there's somebody harassing you and you can't afford a lawyer, right? So you just move. The person goes unreported and they harass someone else. But tempers will flare when people aren't getting their needs met. And when you basically can't afford to go to the doctor, but you know something's wrong, a lot of us are in that boat. I didn't have health care for years because I couldn't afford it. I struggled with work because I was absent more and more because I was sicker. Couldn't afford to really go to the doctor until I got declared disabled. That's why a lot of people want disability, so they can go to the doctor. Why can't you just give us health care that's affordable? And Obamacare is great and all that, but my daughter can't afford it. And penalizing her because she couldn't afford it, that wasn't very smart.
You have arrived at your
We
destination.
need truly affordable health care. We need to be able to take care of our mental health, our physical health. Problems that are small are easy to fix. When they grow and they become bigger, it is very hard to fix them. Look at cancer. If you find cancer early, it's often very treatable and it doesn't come back. But if you wait just a little space of time, you can end up with an untreatable condition that ends your life. So, how many people have died because they didn't have adequate health care? We lose so many babies of color that it's like they're living in a third world country. Because what zip code you live in depends, has a lot to do with what quality of health care you get. And if you can't afford to go to the doctor, then you do without health care. And that can kill you. So, we need to think about providing basic health care to everyone. And I don't mean skimp on stuff and make it lowest bidder type of stuff. I think the lowest bidder mentality is why Georgia has a website that is a joke for applying for food stamps. Half the time I upload documents and a week later I'm uploading them again because it doesn't keep them. That is because they go with the lowest bidder. They don't make sure that stuff works, they just buy it. And then they find out through all these complaints. I tried for 10 months to change my address on Georgia Gateway. 10 months. And this was not during the pandemic. This was before the pandemic. I dread whenever my bi-yearly stuff comes up and I have to submit my proofs. A lot of times I'm submitting them again and again because the system has a memory like a senile old woman. I had to go on Twitter and tweet about not being able to change my address to get anything done. It's really sad because a lot of poor people don't even use Twitter. They don't, you know. But really, it's sad when you have to go on social media to get anything done. They should make sure that whatever product they're being sold is going to work before they spend all this money on it. So many companies out to make a quick buck at the expense of the poor. So I'm going to end my live stream here, but I haven't done much on my game. I haven't really been able to concentrate on my game. I'm too upset over a small group of legislators who decided to make a political rally out of a disaster site. And I just can't wrap my head around it. I really can't. So, I hope that you'll think about disability as more than just an issue of handicapped people and inclusion. Because it's so much more than that. It's basic health care. A lot of people wouldn't be disabled if they had gotten adequate health care. Think about that. 20% of the people in this country have a significant disability. If we were to recognize some of the things, like blood type, that's an easy thing to prove. Because of COVID, we know that people with my blood type, I'm B positive, my daughter is B positive. We catch every cold, every flu. You know, if you've got an employee that works for you that has A or B blood type, you should be wearing masks around them. You know, you should have a mask policy that if any employee in the room or in any place where the ducts to the air conditioning have anything to do with it, y'all should be masking up. Because there's other things out there besides COVID. There's flu, which kills 330,000 people a year. You know, you might get a cold, and it might be just a cold, and somebody with a low immune system might get pneumonia from that. Masks are a good thing. They protect against disease. So why aren't we taking disease seriously? Because COVID is not the only pandemic that is going to be coming. The CDC is already saying that there are other diseases just waiting to break out of the wildlife and go into us. It's just a matter of time. And these mutations for COVID, how long is it going to be before our vaccines are ineffective? Because the more people worldwide that are still getting infected, we don't live in a vacuum. We have to think about, you know, we need to fight this disease in other countries because it'll be coming back to haunt us. And this Delta variant is killing more young people. We need to get school children immunized against it. We need to have protections in the schools. I really don't think that counties are stepping up and doing the things that they need to do to keep these kids safe. And I am very worried about the state of vaccinations, period, because a lot of parents are getting scared by this mumbo-jumbo that's not true. And they are saying, well, no, I'm not going to vaccinate my kid. I'm not going to have them experimented on. But what you got to realize is that vaccinations are tested and retested. And the side effects that can happen to very small minorities of the population. It's not experimenting on our kids. It is using a proven scientific method to protect them against greater harm. And if you don't know what greater harm is, you can get brain damage from a high fever. It's not something to play around with. Are you going to listen to old wives' tales, or are you going to listen to scientific research that is carefully conducted? There are so many people that are so confused about things, they don't know what to believe, and they don't believe in anything. And that is why our government is in such a mess. We have a large population that doesn't believe in anything. But I'm telling you, the scientific method works, and people who study disease know what they're talking about when they come up with a vaccine. And those warnings are just there to let you know, truth in whatever. You need to know the truth about side effects and what to expect that might happen. But just because there are side effects doesn't mean that the vaccine is not good. And it does not mean that your kid will get a bad reaction to it. And that's why when you get a vaccination, you are sitting around for a few minutes to see if something bad happens, where there are medical people who can respond immediately if there is a problem. So we shouldn't be taking it upon ourselves to say, well, vaccines are bad, there are side effects. You've got to compare the side effects to what can happen if you get the disease. People are dying. People are dying from the flu. You can't just say that vaccines are a bad idea because a very minor percentage might get brain damage or organ damage of some sort. It's, they can catch things if you follow the directions, if you wait when you get your vaccination. I go in every week for allergy shots. I have to wait 10 minutes to make sure that I'm not going to have an allergic reaction because I've been taking these things for years. But I could have an allergic reaction that could be life-threatening. But if I had a reaction, I trust that my doctor's office would be able to keep me alive until I got to the hospital. And I trust the hospital to keep me alive. I'm hoping that that never happens, but I'm not going to let a little bitty chance of something bad happening prevent me from getting allergy shots, which will prevent me from having a major bad reaction to something in the environment. You got to be sensible about these things. There are risks to everything. You walk out the door, you could get hit by a meteor like this poor black lady in 1959. She is the only person who has ever gotten hit by a meteor. So that means that your chances of being hit by a meteor are very, very small. A meteor is a meteorite before it hits the ground, by the way. So, meteors fall to Earth all the time, and the fact that only one person has ever been documented to be hit by one tells you that the risk is low. So insurance companies calculate risk. You know, it's risky to just walk. You could fall and hit your head and die. And are we going to stop walking because there's a risk of dying from walking? Of course not. We're going to teach our kids to walk, and we're going to just watch them so that they don't get hurt while they're learning to walk. And sometimes kids do get hurt by learning to walk. Does that mean we should prevent them from walking, bind their little legs so they can't use it? Of course not. That's kind of what the argument about not vaccinating people is all about, because, as many people learn to walk, there's just a very few that fell and got disabled or died from falling trying to learn to walk. But that doesn't mean that we are against learning to walk. Vaccines have about the same probability, depending on the vaccine, of things going wrong and bad results happening. But because it happens to one person and they, in their grief, strike out at the people and places that the vaccines come from, grief has an anger component. And anybody grieving might get irrational for a while. But if you look at numbers, then you're going to realize that most people don't have adverse reactions to vaccines, and most people get protection from vaccines. So my point here is that disabilities happen, and they happen despite the denial of other people who aren't involved in your case or not. It should not be an uphill battle for a person to prove they're disabled. Rather, there should be understanding and caring. And yes, let's get people health care, even if they are investigating their disability and they don't know if they're disabled or not. Give them health care. They can find out if they've got a disability. Maybe that disability can be minimized if it's treated soon enough. Health care might prevent a lot of our disabilities. A fifth of the population being disabled, that's ridiculous. In our country, we're not a third world country. We need to take care of our people instead of just assuming they're crooks and say, oh, they don't deserve health care. Everybody deserves health care. Everybody. Even criminals in jail deserve health care. So, we need health care. We need a lot of other stuff, but that would be the number one thing in my book. Health care and mental health care, which is one of the underlying reasons for our high rates of incarceration. So, I've been expressing my opinion all through this little stream tonight. I would like to know your opinion. Tweet me on Twitter. Write me on Twitch. You can go in my chat even if I'm offline. Go on my Discord, GrannyHandicap. It's ADMAA. ADMAA 3641. I've got my links to my social media. If you want to talk to me about any of the things I've talked about tonight, please express your opinion. I would love to hear from you. Until then, don't let the disabilities get you down, and take care of your mental health. Do something tonight for you. Take care of your, don't let what other people say get you down. Be positive. Think about things you've done in a positive light. These are things to inoculate your mental health so you don't go nuts, because these times are driving me nuts. Y'all take care. This is Granny Handicap signing off for the night. I will be back Monday on Forza Horizon 4. Hope to see you then. Good night.